Sunday, and it is time for the weekend video. So this weekend, I want to talk about a statement that Mike made in the most recent Powercast, the one we just did on Thursday. And he made a statement that he no longer defended Christianity. He made a transition as he came to understand the gospel. And he found that he no longer defended Christianity, but he defended the faith of Christ. So what is the big deal about the faith of Christ, or the faith of God for that matter? You see, nowadays, so many people are hung up on our faith. They don't think about the faith of God. They don't talk about the faith of God. They don't talk about the faith of Christ that Paul talked about many times. Many times Paul talked about his righteousness, his redemption, his justification was by the faith of Christ. But everybody nowadays is hung up on your faith and your believing, and you've got to believe, and if you don't believe, then you're going to suffer the wrath of God. But the gospel is not about your faith. It's not about you. It's not about whether you believe or don't believe. It's about the faith of Christ and what that faith accomplished. It's not about us being believers. It's about the believer. Let me ask you this. If the only people who receive righteousness, the only people who receive forgiveness, salvation, all of that, if it's only for believers, only people who profess faith in Jesus, then what did Jesus say about a believer? You know, Jesus said something very profound about he who believes. He said, "He who believes, the works I do, he shall do also, and greater works than these shall he do, because I go to my Father in heaven." Is he really talking about you? So let's just make a quick list. What were his works? Turning water into wine, healing lepers, healing blind people, raising people from the dead, walking on water, raising himself from the dead. If you remember, he said, "I laid this down and I will take my life back up again." He says, "Destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days." And you have done greater. So what would greater works be? Greater than raising yourself from the dead? The key lies in the end of that statement. He says, "And greater works shall he do, because I go to my Father in heaven." That's the key. He knew he was going to the cross to do this even greater work than just dying and raising himself from the dead. He not only raised himself from the dead, but all who were dead in Adam were raised to life in him. He raised the whole world from the dead. It's by God's faith that all are redeemed. It's by God's faith, not our belief, but his belief. You know, as we've been going through the chapter of Hebrews the past few weeks, we've been talking about these great people of faith in the Old Testament, and by faith, they received a good report, yet they did not receive the promise. See, the promise was perfection that would come through Abraham's seed. And Jesus was the seed, and it was by his faith that the promise was fulfilled and that old covenant was ended. See, faith is an old covenant thing. Belief is an old covenant thing. Belief was required under the old covenant, but it was only one man's faith. It was only one man's belief that could fulfill that promise, and that was by the faith of God. And even Hebrews talks about the faith of God. It finds the faith of God to be the most important thing. It says that through faith, the world was created by the word of God. So what if people don't believe? You know, Paul asked that very question. He said, "So what if some did not believe? Does that make the faith of God of no effect? God forbid." Their faith, people's lack of faith, cannot undo what the faith of God did. Now remember, in Hebrews chapter 11, it said that all those people received a good report, yet they did not receive the promise. Well, Isaiah prophesied and said, "Who hath believed our report?" John picked up on Isaiah's prophecy, and so did Paul. And what did Paul have to say about it? He said that God concluded all in unbelief so he could have mercy upon all. The only reason that we were all redeemed was because of unbelief. It's not because of our belief. Paul said if somebody doesn't believe, that still cannot undo what God's faith did. Well, that was the weekend video. I hope you liked it. If you liked it, click on the YouTube button below and subscribe and click like. If you didn't like it, click on like and tell me about it. And have a good week.